Hello, everyone. This is Gwydion, and today I'm going to talk to you about Obscure, which is a found footage inspired horror TTRPG by Tommy Sensenauer. Now, I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but he runs a company called Sensenot Games. And if you look on his website, he actually has created several games. I'm focused on Obscure tonight. It won an Emmy, apparently a Judge's Spotlight 2024 award, which is awesome. Good for him. And he's created several different Kickstarters. I backed one of them called Groton One Bit Deeper, which is kind of a minimalist TTRPG. You can play it anywhere. I actually played it on a plane, in a hotel room, and it's a fun game. But I'm here tonight to talk about Obscure because of my love of horror games. So, talk a little bit more briefly about Tommy Sensenauer. On his website, you can see a little bit about his background. He's a Danish illustrator, graphic designer, and game creator. And again, he created several other games, SVMP, which is a Kickstarter game, Groton One Bit Deeper, and Mork DOD. So, as always, I encourage you to look on his website and support these independent gamers. One of the things I saw in an interview with Tommy is that he recently, I think it's as of this year, he recently became a game designer and creator full time. So not a lot of people can do that. I haven't found terribly many people that have been able to take that leap. I've I really appreciate folks that can do that, and particularly these independent game creators. So let's go briefly. I'm gonna open up the shop and I'll show you what you can buy for Obscure and the cost, and then we'll kind of jump into the game. So first off, you can buy the digital PDF only. So if you just want a digital copy and nothing else, it's $11 USD on his site. I know you'll pay some shipping. I don't know what. Well, sorry, PDF you won't pay shipping. I actually went all in and bought the book with dice set, so I'll cover that in a minute. But yeah, digital PDF only is all you need for the game. You'll need a couple of D6s, but you can use any D6s. So it's really inexpensive to pick up and start playing. You can buy the book only for 30 US dollars. It's a soft cover. I've ordered mine. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't talk about the quality or what it looks like, how it's made, but it is, as I understand it, 88 pages, and we'll flip through the PDF version. You can also buy the book with the dice set. That's what I chose to do, mainly because I like supporting independent game designers. So he made it clear that you certainly don't need the dice set, but it's cool, right? It's always cool to have new dice and dice that are custom for the game. So $45 USD for the all-in if you'd like to buy everything. All right. I'll also post a link to this page and also to his Kickstarter page. To be clear, the Kickstarter's over, but you can go and buy the game. I just thought it'd be helpful to link to this because it does have a lot of good information on what Obscure is about. And there are links in here as I scroll down to different images. There are links to some videos, I believe, and you can see a little bit. There hasn't been a ton that I've seen on this, but there have been a handful of videos where Tommy is interviewed talking about the game. So you'll see, and I've watched them all great interviews. They talk about, in some cases, I think it's just Obscure. Actually, all three of these, I think, are just related to Obscure. So he talks about the game, what inspired him to create the game, and what have you. All right, so let's get into the actual PDF. So I am going to do a flip through. I know not everybody does that, and I know there's some risk. Someone just kind of screenshotting and taking that information. I sure hope nobody does that from my video walkthrough, but I thought to hopefully get a little bit of coverage out there to Tommy, I wanted to put this out there. So I'll try to go relatively quickly through more of the art. And there are 4 game scenarios that come with Obscure. I'm going to go through just the first one, which is I think the demo that he might have even released at some point. But I'm going to briefly walk through that just so you get a flavor for what these scenarios are about. But I'll try to do it quickly, as again, I don't want anyone using my stream to take his information that is copyrighted. So with that, let's jump into Obscure. So here's what it looks like. It will be a square soft cover that you receive if you order the physical copy. So I love the image. You can kind of see what this is going for. You've got kind of like that camera image on the front cover. So I really enjoy that. And there's a foreword. I wanted to show the credits just a bit. So he talks about the mechanics. I've heard him say this on a few streams that he was inspired by Tunnel Goons. I'm not familiar with that, but I did look at the website, and it looks like it's a pretty easy, basic 2d6 type of mechanic. So I think that inspired him heavily. And then he's also talked a lot about the Blair Witch Project, as well as a number of other um, videos and movies that he references here. So I would encourage you to check these out. I've seen several of them, but not all of them. So I'll be curious to look through some of these. And he also gives credit to some of his top Kickstarter backers, playtesters, and everyone who helped crowdfund it. So I always like it when an author gives a shout out to all of the things that inspired them. So let's get into, I'll stay on this one image and just show you, these are the kind of images. I think he took a lot of stock photos that might be available, but really did a lot to make them his own. And whether it's different filters or things he's done with them, I really like the vibe. So I won't stop on too many of these, but this is the type of image that you can expect to see if you buy Obscure. All right, table of contents. So I'm going to focus more about the game, the rules, character creation, and then I'll touch on campaign tools and tips. And then I'll end with just a quick walkthrough of one of the 4 scenarios, which will be the child. So let's flip into about the game. So he describes the game as a tabletop role-playing game inspired by found footage. So video games like Outlast, Blair Witch Project. And I think what's important to know is that this is more about storytelling than heavy mechanics. If you're looking for a crunchy RPG and something that you can play that has a ton of rules, everything's really spelled out, this isn't the game for you. But at least from my opinion. But if you are looking for something that has that horror vibe, that tries to suck you in and really, above all else, highlights storytelling, I think this is a really cool game. It reminds me, and I might get blown up in chat if people watch this video, video and make comments, but it reminds me of 10 Candles. Not because of the mechanics, but it kind of gives off those vibes. It's horror, it's about storytelling. He really wants to, I think, move the game along, and this is really geared around one shot. So all of the games, I believe, are intended, all the scenarios are intended to be done and in just one session. So from someone who doesn't get a lot of time to play and run games and has a really hard time finding the time to do campaigns, I really like it when authors do something that do games like this where they're geared around one shots. Really easy to pick up. Character creation, you'll see, is super quick. I think 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're off and running. I also think that this would be pretty easy to create and hack your own solo rules. And that's important to me because I find myself more and more, I love running games for people, but mostly it's online. So I sometimes have a hard time finding a group and creating a group to play. So I like games that I can really use on from a solo standpoint. And I think I've seen in his Discord and other places, I think he's going to try to add on a solo component, but no guarantees. But I do feel like that's something that people have requested and that he might take up. In the meantime, I might try to hack it myself and do some solo variants. I have some ideas on how to do that. So the player characters here are not heroes. They're regular, everyday people caught in horrifying situations. So, and it's really intended to, I think, evoke the feeling of watching a horror movie or a ghost story around a campfire. And he's done a lot of the scenarios. I think maybe all of them are around like typical tropes, right? Like it might be the insane asylum, the woods at night, things that are going to be really familiar, but in a good way, in my opinion. And he makes it clear that it's about solving mysteries. It's about running and hiding. Think about Outlast and all of those games, maybe Amnesia, which I loved the first Amnesia game, but games where it's about confronting your worst fears and overcoming them, but it's really about getting through the night and out alive. Not so much about combat. There's some mechanics in here about combat, but it's really more about survival. It's set in the 90s, so no smartphones, no Google Maps. You might have a digital camcorder, a portable Polaroid, camera, something like that, but it's going to be really basic on what you have. And how do you play? It's intended for at least one game master or what's called the observer, and also like one player. It is recommended two or more, and I think that's probably more because of the role playing component and really the storytelling. It's nice to have a couple of people that are doing the role playing, but you can play with just one person. There are character sheets that I'll show at the end. I'll try to remember that, but you do have character sheets that are both, there's one that's form fillable and one that's just a digital character sheet. Certainly print it out, laminate it, do what you want with it, and very easy to fill out and to keep track of things. It's not a game heavy tracking information type game. You'll need that. You'll need a number of D6s and preferably two in different colors, but everything else is in this book as to what you need. It talks about setting the tone, and as I think it's good advice for everyone. I try to do this in all the games that I run, whether it's D&D 5e, Shadow of the Demon Lord, Pathfinder 2e, or any of the other games I run. Really talk to your players about the tone that you're trying to evoke. It's okay if you want to do like a combination of horror and comedy, or if you want to just do outright horror, but it's good to get that buy-in on the front end. And again, the characters are just regular people, and it's real life. Magic, monsters, supernatural, as far as you know, don't exist. So things that do happen should be really creepy and scary to the players. All right, I'm skipping past again some of the things that I think are really cool and evocative, but I just don't want to share everything that's in the book and let you experience it yourself. So one of the key, and maybe one of the only key stats that you'll get are energy points, referred to as EP. These will cover all of the actions that take up energy at all. Whether it's mental, physical energy, whatever it is, you're going to use your EP or energy points. You hit 0 and you're either exhausted or dead. So what do you do with these EP? You spend EP when attempting something that requires a dice roll. So you'll typically roll 2d6 as standard, and that's referred to as an effort roll. He also talks about how there's, I think, some similarities that we'll get into that are, I think, are similar to the Alien RPG. I think there's some stress die in there. I don't play that game, but I've seen people play it, and I think he has a mechanic somewhat similar to that. So typically you're going to do 2d6, and your aim is to beat the difficulty rating, or DR, that's set by the observer. So you roll your 2d6, you're going to compare them against that difficulty rating and see whether or not you succeed. And it is important, you can use your EP and spend your EP to add D6s to the dice pool. So each extra die that you use by spending your EP are added to the dice pool, and they're referred to as energy dice. So you spend them, you roll them separately. When you spend EP on a roll, though, you only add the highest rolled energy die. So if you decide to spend 3, you're going to use them all, but you only are going to take the highest of those rolls. So you still lose that EP, but you only take the highest from that pool. So you'll get your 2d6 plus the result of the highest roll of the additional dice that you add. And if you have some equipment you're using, you might get a plus to that result. So EP also functions as health. So if you attempt something dangerous, fighting an enemy, jumping, or what have you, and roll below your DR, you lose your EP corresponding to the difference rolled. So if you hit 0 EP, you become dead. You die. So, and I think there's a mechanic more that we'll go through that I'll explain this in a little bit more detail coming up. Helping out, so if there's other PCs in the games with you, then you can spend your own EP to help another player with your energy dice and add to the effort roll. If you fail a task and want to retry again, the second task is going to require more energy. That means that you have to spend one additional EP on the next roll, and it's cumulative. So it's a way of, I think, not allowing you to just continuously retry something. You can regain EP to some degree, resting, sleeping, or eating and drinking. So resting, if you take like a 10-minute break, you get one EP back. He does mention that if you get a good night's sleep, that it restores all EP and removes all AP, which we have not talked about. Those are anxiety points. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he also says, good luck with that. I have a feeling that there are probably virtually no situations, absent maybe in a campaign, that you're going to get a good night's sleep. Eating and drinking restores D3 plus EP plus a modifier. So you're going to roll a D6, and obviously a 1 to 2 will be a 1, 3 to 4 is a 2, 5 to 6 is a 3. And you'll get that EP back plus your plus any modifier that comes with, maybe the food that you're consuming. All right, AP or anxiety points. So in these scenarios, you'll see the image, the picture of this anxiety man. And when his face appears in the scenarios, it's an indication, it's not an outright edict, but it's an indication that you might want to, as the observer, give out some anxiety points. And what are anxiety points? So anxiety is a defense mechanism, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It generates adrenaline, and it makes you more alert in dangerous situations. However, it can also lead to panic. And if you do panic, that's really bad. So how do you receive anxiety points? When you experience something terrifying or traumatizing, the observer can choose to give you an anxiety point. And if the experience relates to your phobia, the observer can actually give you 2 anxiety points. We'll cover phobias when we talk character creation. So how do you use anxiety points? You add anxiety points to your character sheet, and every time you make an effort roll, you must add another D6 for each anxiety point you have. And those are called anxiety dice. You roll those separately because you take only the lowest rolled anxiety dice, and you do add that to your result. So it has the potential to helping you pass a task. However, if you get a 1 on any of the anxiety dice, you panic, and the observer gets to decide the worst possible outcome, or they can consult a table that's in here for inspiration. How do you calm down? So can you get rid of these anxiety points? Yeah, you can. And the observer can decide when you're calm and get rid of those points. And this might happen when you rest, you have like a cool flashback or uplifting experience, but there are ways that you can get rid of those anxiety points. So he does have an example here that I'll walk through briefly. So in his example, he says Joshua has 2 anxiety points on his character sheet. He wants to jump a ledge, but doesn't want to spend any additional energy points. So he rolls 4d6. 2 of them are for his anxiety dice, since he has 2 anxiety points. And 2 of them are just his normal 2d6. So he rolls 4 and 6 on the effort roll. So that's his standard roll. And 2 and 5 on the anxiety dice. So this gives him a result. It says a result of 14. I think that's a typo, and it should be 12, I believe, because he gets a 4 and 6 from his standard effort rolls. So that's 10. And then he takes the lowest of his anxiety dice, which is a 2. So I think that'd be a 12. And in this case, the DR, or difficulty rating, I think it's called difficulty rating, is a 8. So either way, he passed. If he had gotten a 1 on either of those anxiety dice, he would have panicked. And the observer could have described like, hey, you hesitated, you fell as you were trying to jump, and you lose 1 EP, as an example. All right, additional rules. So difficulty ratings. Similar to a lot of games, you think of D&D 5e, other TTRPGs, Pathfinder, there are references for the difficulty rating. And he shows 4 to 6 as being easy, 7 to 9 standard, 10 to 12 difficult, 13 to 15 very hard, and anything that's 16 plus shouldn't be possible. And if you think about it, you're rolling 2d6, so the max you can get there is 12. If you roll an additional effort die and you use it for your energy points, the most you're going to get there is 6. That's an 18. So most cases, I guess you could also have potentially an anxiety die as well. So I guess theoretically, the most possible I would think is a 24. but I don't think that would come into play too often. So knowledge. He does make the point that the player really should be the one that understands, like, do they know about something? So if the player asks, hey, do I know something about X, Y, or Z? The observer should take the opportunity to say, I don't know, do you? And let the player come up with their background and story and let them get engaged in the game. Advantage. During the game, some tasks are easier if it fits into your character's background or profession. If that happens and the observer can give you advantage on a roll, and that just means you add one extra d6 to the effort dice pool and discard the lowest. So again, you normally will start with 2d6. In this case, you'll start with 3, and then you'll throw away the lowest result from those 3. You still might have the extra dice if you chose to use energy points or anxiety dice, but I think this is talking about your core effort dice. Conditions, I think these go into play more if you are going to do potentially more of a campaign type thing, but there are conditions that are common in a game of Obscure: dehydration, hyperventilation, bleeding, what have you, and they can drain your EP over time. And to recover from a condition, Tommy basically says use common sense. If you're hungry or dehydrated, stop and eat or drink. If you're bleeding, patch up the wound. So pretty much common sense, no like typical, specific game mechanics. So, all right, let's go through another of his examples here. So in this example, he says the journalist wants to capture something specific in a photograph. The observer gives the player advantage because of their profession. He's a journalist. So the journalist does not want to spend any EP, so they roll 3d6. And that would be the 2 standard d6, and then he has advantage, so he or she would add 1 more. So they roll 3d6, the result is a 2, 6, and 4. So in this case, again, the player is rolling with advantage, discards the 2, so they get the 6 and the 4. So they would get a 6 plus 4 is 10, and they are using a digital camera, which if you look at the equipment, which we'll page through in a minute, they get +1 for that, a digital camera. So the total is an 11. So you compare that to the DR set by the observer to see if you pass or fail that test. One thing I didn't look at is I think you have to roll above. I don't want to flip through here. I don't remember if you need to roll the exact level of difficulty rating or above the difficulty rating. I feel like it's above, but maybe I'll type that in the notes of the comment section once I post this. I just don't want to flip through right now. All right, combat. The game is deadly and this isn't really about combat. You want to avoid it if possible. Some situations you might have to fight. So how do you attack an enemy? So you must roll above, maybe this is what I was thinking of. So when you're attacking an enemy, you have to roll above their EP. So I think the DR, you do roll at or above. But when you're attacking an enemy, you have to roll above their EP to succeed. And the asterisk down at the bottom shows that if you roll equal to their EP, then you miss and the monster or creature misses, and you'll kind of start over and start your turn again. So if you roll above, then you subtract that from the enemy's EP. And then you get to immediately attack once more and to attempt to roll against the now reduced EP. When the enemy hits 0 EP, it dies. And you can spend as many EP as you dare to add energy dice to your effort roll on each attack. And after attacking with a weapon, you get to add a weapon's modifier to the rolled results. And if you roll below, you miss, and the enemy immediately hits back. And the amount that you've rolled below their EP is how many EP you lose. So if you, let's just say you rolled a 7, their EP is an 8, then you would immediately lose 1 EP. And it's simulating you're attacking, and then the monster immediately attacked back. You missed, and you were damaged. So ranged attacks. Like shooting a firearm or throwing a weapon, it works the same, but the enemy can't necessarily just attack back right away. So it might run towards you or flee or something like that. So if you miss with a ranged weapon and the enemy comes at you, the observer can decide if you get the opportunity for another attack or if the enemy reaches you. So that can be adjudicated by the observer. So the enemy also gets an attack. So when an enemy attacks, the observer rolls 2d6 and adds the attack modifier. If the result exceeds the PC's EP, then the PC loses the corresponding amount. If the result's lower, the attack is a miss, and the PC gets the next move. So some enemies have special rules that you'll get into, but that's the basic mechanics. So I know that was a bit confusing. So let me roll through this example and explain it a little bit more. So the enemy rolls a 6 against your EP of 8. The enemy fails to hit you, but it doesn't automatically lose 2 EPs because of this. You always have to roll dice to actively fight back. Oh, I didn't read that before. So I guess in this case, it's your turn. So in this case, the enemy's attacking you. And in this case, you decide whether or not you want to fight, flee, or something else. So in this case, you decide to fight back and you roll a total result of 7. The enemy's EP is 9, so you miss, and the enemy automatically hits you back for 2 damage, 9 minus 7. And now it's your turn again. So it's a little bit, I'll have to go through this again a couple of times, I think, but I think it's a little bit confusing to me on the timing. So I'll have to run through this a bit again, but in general, I think you get to attack first, and there might be surprise situations. So, but again, combat is not the number one thing in this game by any means. All right, flashback. So each player rolls a D3 at the beginning of each session to determine how many flashbacks you have. And flashbacks are used to discard anxiety points. When you use one, you're going to describe a memory or something that motivates or cheers up the character. And they can only be used when not engaged in combat or other hectic situations. All right, let's get into character creation. So why are the characters in this situation? So start by reading why you're here from this scenario, and you can then make up a motivation for the player characters. So what, are they investigating something? Are they shooting a documentary or what have you? And you create your characters by following these steps below. There's 5 steps. They're all very basic. Or you can choose a pre-made character that we'll flip through. So step 1, name your character, give them a short background story and an occupation. Step 2, give them a phobia and a personal agenda. Step 3, roll a D3 to determine the number of flashbacks you'll have per session. And then you start with D6 plus 6 energy points. Those are your maximum energy points. And you start with 6 pieces of equipment. So you roll 2D6 on each category on the equipment table. Now, that's it. Now we'll go through it because I do want to go through a couple of options, because he also says you can just pick your own equipment if you want. You can pick it from the table to from each table. He also suggests that you start by rolling your equipment and then build your character from the results. So if you look at the suggestion here, he talks about, hey, maybe you roll your equipment and, maybe they have a camcorder. That might mean they're an amateur filmmaker. Or if they roll and they have a gun, maybe they're a private detective. So that's a good way to try to make your character make some sense. So here's the equipment. So when creating your character, you get to choose or roll on the tables below to get equipment. Some scenarios might have some additional equipment. And there are equipment adds. Most of them adds +1 to tests, I believe, unless noted below. And they add a +1 to your specific role. So let's see if it's specific, obviously, if it makes sense. So his example is searching for something in the dark. Using your flashlight, you'll get a +1 to that search roll. So the categories are devices and gear, weapons and tools, and nutrition. So devices and gear, I think the way I read this is you would roll maybe a D6 on the first column and then a D6 on the second column of devices and gear. So you'd get 1 in that first column and 1 in that second. And it does mention that all electronic devices come with D6 times 30 minutes of battery. So that's important because these things will run out. And on the character sheet, it gives you a way to track that in game as well. And there's some things like you might roll a dog companion, but only one PC can have a dog. So re-roll that if necessary. The weapons and tools, there's knives, there's hatchets, and it does tell you if you get more than, say, a +1, hunter's knife is +2, hatchet is +3. So there are options that make things, are weapons and tools that are stronger than others. Nutrition, bag of chips, energy bar. So I think in general, you would be able to recover a D3 EP for anything that you get on the nutrition, anything you consume, but you'll also be able to recover additional, like an energy bar will give you that D3 EP plus one, sandwich plus two. I love how some of the liquor is a minus. You'll get D3 EP, but you might get a minus to that roll for ingesting any type of liquor. All right. So here's some examples of pre-made characters. So I'll just read through the top one because you'll get the idea. But this one is the anxious nurse. So you're very caring, recently educated nurse, anxious but brave. What is your agenda? You want to prove something to yourself. Your EP, you start with 11. Your phobia is hemophobia. That's interesting as a nurse, or blood. And your equipment, you got a mobile phone, a first aid kit, Swiss knife, a hand pistol, fruit, and a bottled water. And your occupation is unemployed nurse. That's it. So there's a handful. There's 4 on this page. There's another 4 on the next page. So it gives you a pretty good amount of potential characters. So before we jump into character death, I think it's a good time to briefly look at the character sheet. So this is just the standard digital character sheet. So you would print this, you can write on it, you can laminate it, but it gives you all of the information on one page. And then if you die, you go to the next page. And I'm going to get into this in the next section, so I won't cover this yet. But this is every character sheet, very simple. You also have a form fillable one. So if I click on highlight fields, you'll see you can just type in, the name, the occupation. You can check off the check boxes. So this is cool because you can really use this to track things in kind of more a digital environment, but do it online rather than have to print something out if you don't want to. That's cool. All right, let's go back to the character sheet. So character death. Death is not the end. When your character dies, flip your character sheet. And on the back, you're going to find how you can still take part in the game. So you're going to roll a d6 and you have a 50% chance of becoming an evil spirit, 50% chance of becoming a helpful spirit. And you'll get 3 actions the rest of the game that you can use only once, but anytime you see fit. And I believe you can only use each action once. So you get 3, you can only use each one of them once. And you also get to read about the truth in the end game. And I'll go through that as part of the scenario that we flip through. He does mention that ghosts may not be appropriate for all scenarios. So you can choose to adjust these rules if you want, or you can add the ghosts, or you can add maybe the players can jog a memory, or the person that died can use these to jog memories. But you can see some of the things you can do as an evil spirit. You can appear out of thin air and push a character. And maybe that causes them to stumble or fail a test. Can appear near a character hiding and reveal their position, maybe to the boss monster or entity. Or they appear as a vision for one character with the gruesome details about their death and cause that character to lose 1 energy point and gain an anxiety point. And there's also the helpful component as well. So campaign rules. So these are, again, if you run multiple sessions or multiple scenarios, he gives you some ideas on how to make this more of a campaign field. So conditions are more important. You can track inventory points. You can potentially gain more phobias. There's a brief discussion of building out a skill system. And that, again, would be only if you do more than one scenario or one shot. All right, so what are the tools for the observer? So the observer deals with dark subjects and violence and what have you. And again, make sure that your players are comfortable with whatever direction you go in. Reward creativity. I think that's always a good thing and good reminder, whether it's giving people advantage or just let them succeed if there's a really good explanation, whatever. Split the party. So this is a horror game. There's some ways that Tommy has built into the scenarios, very easy ways to split the party and create that really sense of foreboding and dread. Engage the players. It goes without saying. The game is going to be more fun to everyone if they get to be a part of it and a part of the storytelling. Set the tone. One thing I really love to do, and you'll see on my channel and other videos, is really set the stage with audio. I stream audio. I do all my playing online for the most part. So I do a lot of streaming audio and sounds, jump scares, things to set the tone and the mood and scare players. And then cutscenes. He says, once separated, you might want to build tension and focus on one or the other and kind of use one group or player or the other and use it as a way to kind of flip between the two. Some suggestions on panic attacks. So when a character does panic, they have anxiety points and they roll a one. This just gives you some ideas, and it's just inspiration. You don't have to use these. You can just straight out roll on these if you'd like, or you can use them to draw inspiration, or just pick one if it makes sense. So these are all just examples of what can happen if your character panics. The 90s, so it gives you a little bit of color and feel for what were the 90s like, right? And what you might want to expect. I won't read through this, pretty self-explanatory, but cool that he gives a little bit of color on what you might have engaged in or encountered in the 90s. All right, so that is everything to know about Obscure, at least relatively. That's probably a little more than a half an hour. So I'm going to spend the last, whatever it takes me, 10, 15 minutes to just briefly walk through, maybe less than that, but one of the scenarios. So this scenario is called The Child. So all of them start off with, why are you here? So I'm going to try not to go through in detail all of the information, but know that you're going to get a basic description of why you were here that the characters and the players should know. And maybe they can use that to do a little bit to metagame and build their character around the scenario. Scenario intro, I think that would be more probably for the observer to know, but it'll give you a little bit of background of how you arrived where you are, how you locate what you need to, and basically how does it set up the scenario for you. And then for most cases, this one has a more robust map than some of the others, but this is almost an outright dungeon crawl, right? You've got you're in a St. Sanchez asylum basement. So the way I like this, I printed this out already, even though I'm waiting for the book. I printed it and bound it myself. And I love the way this works because on the left-hand side, as you're looking at the pamphlet or booklet, you'll see the map. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see the descriptions that are referenced here. So right now, this is highlighting in white that I believe you'll start in this section, the hallway, boiler room, electrohydrotherapy room, and the other is grayed out because you haven't really unlocked those yet. So if you flip to the next page, and again, think about a booklet, this will be on the right-hand side, you'll have a description of the hallway. You'll have a little indication of when you might be, it might be a good time to give out anxiety points to the players. So this little image of the anxiety man. And so, and a little more color, just kind of bullet points enough to give you enough information, but you can also embellish this, add to it, but it gives you enough information of each description, in my mind, to keep things moving along. And then you have a really cool image of something that you might encounter as you're exploring the asylum, but I will not spoil that for you. So now you're into the next section. So you can see he's grayed out the right-hand side. So now you're on the left side of the map. And again, if you look to the right of the pamphlet, you're going to see all the information that you need to run those sections and what you'll encounter. All right, so now you'll have the entity, the being, the boss monster. In this case, it's something called the child. So you'll have a description of what that entity is, the motivation of that entity, and the behavior. So whether it's, when will you encounter it? Do you have to trigger somehow before the entity will come out and show itself? And once you do, it will give you some information about the mechanics of the entity. What does it do? What are its patterns? How might it find the players? And then finally, its stats, really simple, energy points, and what is its attack? So it has 13 energy points and its attack value is +3. So if you remember what I said about when you die, what happens, you'll be able to discover and read about the truth in the end game. So the truth really gives you the overall background. It's kind of like what you're thinking about a traditional like 5e D&D game or something. In my mind, it's like the backstory and what all happened in this asylum. So this kind of gives you the overall truth. And also the end game. And in this case, I like it. I haven't looked at all the scenarios, but it gives you kind of 3 options to really, quote unquote, succeed in this scenario. You can end the curse, you can get the hell out, or you can kill the child. So you have options, which I think is really cool. You have clues. So these were referenced. I didn't stop on them, but they were referenced in the game. But you have various clues that will help you piece together what are you trying to do? What are you discovering? And what do you need to do to maybe end the curse, kill the child, or what have you? And you'll also potentially encounter some found footage. These were also noted in the scenario itself. So it gives you a little bit of flavor text. And again, you can embellish this as the observer, but what do you find on these surveillance tapes? So it gives you a little more detail. So the rest of this book is really just about those scenarios. So it's a total of 80 pages. I'm going to scroll all the way back up. But I really like this vibe. Simple game, but I think it's going to be easy for me to adapt online. I'm going to try to put this in Fantasy Grounds Unity and maybe share once I've got this into Fantasy Grounds and created a character sheet. And I might also try to adapt this for myself. So I hope that's helpful walkthrough. And again, I really encourage you to check out indie authors like Tommy Sensenauer. And I've really liked what I've seen so far. And I think Obscure is going to be right up my alley. It's got that horror theme and vibe that I love. So again, hope this was helpful to you. Give me some comments if you liked what you saw here. If you didn't like it, I certainly would love to hear that as well. But I hope you find this interesting and this content useful, and drop a comment if you do. So until next time, I hope to see you around all the Discords, the Fantasy Grounds forums, and all the different Discords that I'm active in. Thanks, everyone.